are heading towards a net zero future. The government will be banning gas boilers in new homes from 2025. New petrol and diesel cars will be banned from 2030. And it is now legally bound to reach net zero by 2050, the government, that is. But who is footing the bill that low and middle-income families will inevitably face? Well, proposals are reportedly being discussed by senior government advisors that could see poorer families receive payments to offset increases in gas bills resulting from the government's net zero drive. Joining us now is Tom Burke, the chairman and founding director of E3G. Welcome to the show this morning, Tom.
Morning.
What is this? What are the proposals that are being discussed here? This is about gas boilers specifically, is it?
No. This is actually the third story the Times has run about things the government might do in order to get us to net zero and who will be paying for them. But all of the stories the Times has run have been unattributed leaks of things that might happen, the government might do. Right now, of course, Whitehall, the government's under real pressure to do something in advance of Glasgow to show that it's walking the talk on climate change. And so there's an enormous range of things being discussed in Whitehall about how you do that. And obviously one of the key questions is what kind of things you're going to do that actually are affordable and won't add unnecessarily to people's bills. And what we've seen, I think, coming out is selectively people are leaking particular things. But that always happens in Whitehall when you've got a big policy discussion going on. Most of those ideas never see the light of day. I don't know whether this current idea, which is to give people a rebate, as it were, for the increase in their bills, I don't know whether this will actually see the light of day or not. Even so, I don't think it's a very good idea.
Oh, you do? So it wouldn't be a good idea to... I think this is an idea about means testing subsidies. So the richer people would have to replace things themselves, and poorer people, the government would fund or part fund that. What sort of solutions do you think might be better, potentially, to help us reach net zero? Who should pay?
Well, we're all going to pay one way or another. We're either going to pay to do sensible things and reduce our carbon emissions, or we're going to pay in the kind of impacts on our lives, daily lives, that we've seen broadcast from around the world recently as the climate changes. So I don't think there's any escape from the idea that we're going to have to pay to do something in a way that's safer. But how we pay varies a lot. Now, what the government's currently proposing, or at least what's in the story today, is that the government will tax carbon and use the revenues from that taxes to offset for people, particularly lower and middle income people, the cost of in doing all the things we need to do to get carbon out of the energy system. And that sounds really attractive. But you've got to think about what it means. If you're taxing carbon, the reason you're doing that is to drive the carbon out of the economy. Well, if that happens, then the amount of tax you raise is lowered. So what are you going to pay for the rebate with? Now, I can see why it's very attractive for the Prime Minister to possibly like the idea that he's going to give people lots of money, and people will love it until the government tries to take that money back and stop paying it, and at which point it becomes very unpopular. So I think this is a badly thought through idea, the one that's currently being discussed in the Times.
So how do you propose? I mean, there is a new clean heat grant, for example, that is due to start next April. So that's something the government is doing. But what other things? You don't seem too convinced by this particular idea. What kinds of things do you think the government should be doing then? Because families, especially low-income families, will inevitably be faced with those bills, and we sort of have to do something, don't we?
No, and I agree with that, and we've got to make it affordable. One of the first things, if you want to give people a tax break to help with getting to net zero, then stop people having to pay VAT on their home improvements. Because one of the home improvements that's absolutely central to getting to net zero is to increase the energy efficiency of our homes, which will, of course, lower our bills. So if you want to help people take on that first, as it were, addition, lower the VAT, take away the VAT on energy saving, as it were, and put the VAT, if you like, on gas, where it's not at the moment, which induces people to burn fossil fuels instead of using electricity to heat their bills, where there isn't a VAT piece. So there are lots of smart things you can do that don't impose unnecessary burdens on people, and there are some really stupid things you can do. It's the really important thing for the government to do is to work out and do the smart ones, not the stupid ones. If you want people to buy heat pumps, and I think we're going to need people to buy a lot of heat pumps, then what you need to do is help them with the capital cost of the heat pump. That means creating a situation where people can borrow the money to do that at the same price the government pays for it, not very much, instead of having to borrow it as they would for their mortgage at 6-7%, a much higher rate. So there are quite a lot of clever things the government can do to incentivize people to do things that will, in the longer run, make their bills much lower.
Well, Tom Burke, founding director of E3G, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Very interesting thoughts.